Hey guys, what's going on? It's Bammy here and welcome to today's video, which is me predicting what I do believe will be the next potential marquee matchups for the upcoming weekend, which I do believe starts on the 25th of November, so week 4 in the month of November. And I am going to break down what teams I do believe will be featured in this week's marquee matchup in order to enable you to get the best possible head start on investing in those big players in order to make yourself some mad profits on the weekend when those marquee matchups drop. Anyway, enough chit-chatting. First up, I do believe a possibility, my apologies, could be the Chelsea versus Spurs game. Now, this is a London derby, and it's one of the only derbies in this weekend's potential marquee matchup lineup. But the only thing that might skew this is the fact that the Chelsea Hazard Player of the Month, is already a thing that's on the go at the moment. So that might mean that this isn't necessarily something that's going to be considered by EA, even though this is the London derby between Chelsea and Spurs. I do believe this might not actually be featured just because of the Player of the Month Hazard. That being there might make this a doubt, because all players are currently through the roof for Chelsea, the Premier League, Belgium and so on, just because of the Hazard Player of the Month. And this would cause a complete disorganised inflation in the market, and I don't believe EA would want that to happen. So for that reason, I think this one might be a doubt, but don't completely write it off. There is that chance that it still might feature, and I will still invest a few coins of the odd cheap end players like Son, for example. Just low end cheap players that you're not really going to lose too much money on if it's not featured. You can resell it for approximately the same value, so you're not going to lose too much. It's minimal. It's always a risk, obviously. Everything's always a risk when you're investing, but it's a minimal risk as far as the big risks go. Second up, I do believe this is going to be the best one to invest your money into, and this is the Basel versus Sion game. I believe this is most likely, and it's quite poor when you think of it that way, really, because there's a sheer lack of big games featuring this weekend, so games like this will really come into the mix. Now, it's not really a derby of any sorts. It's only based on the fact that both of these teams are top of the Swiss League, and for that reason it makes it a rivalry in its own sense, really, to obtain the title of the Swiss League. And I'm just going to invest in low-end people like these that you can pick up for approximately discard price. You're not going to lose too much money on them if this actually isn't featured, which I do believe it will be featured. It's just obviously minimal risk. Goalkeepers are always a good one to go for as well, because you're always going to need a goalkeeper in that league, and any goalkeeper that you see will shoot up in value. So it's just good to get any investments going on any of the low-end players that you can find, and this is all going to help in your potential crazy profits that you're going to make if and when this marquee matchup potential one is featured in this weekend. Also for this one, I would argue they might try and keep it to the exact gold quality like they did in the weekend prior to this one between Fenerbahce and Galatasaray, the Turkish League one. They made it so that it's an exact quality of gold, just in order to drive all of the gold players up. Now, I argue that that could be something that they might do, but at the same time, just looking at the sheer lack of gold players here that are on offer, it might also not be a possibility because there's just not enough gold players in this league in order to make that happen. But if there is, then oh by Christ, they might as well just do that, because that way they're gonna it's gonna drive the market value up so much for every single gold player in this league. So I would argue any cheap player you can see on the market for approximately discard price in this league, just pick them up, because they will shoot up so much, and if they don't, I'll be massively surprised. So there's any gold low end player in this league, just invest your money into, because it's such a small league, so there's going to be a high lack of gold players in this league, so it's going to drive all gold players value up so much in order to either A, match that minimum gold player quality, or to get that squad rating up to usually about 74 or 76 for a low-end league if it's not exact quality of gold. The next two are both featured in the French league. I'm a bit hesitant as to which one it might actually be. None of them are both derbies as such, but they are both pretty big games between two heavyweights. So because of that reason, and because of the sheer lack of games that are on offer this weekend, it might be that these two do crop up, and it really would not surprise me because there's not really many big games on this weekend. But I would argue that this game here, the PSG versus Lyon game, holds the most credibility over the other game in the French League, because this collectively is the bigger game, because it features arguably the biggest team in the league in PSG, and then Lyon as well, another heavyweight in this league. But I would argue that this would be the one that is most likely to be featured. So if you do see any low-end cheap players for approximately discard price, or maybe around about discard price, because for me this one's a bit of a question mark over this one. I don't know whether this one or the next one will be featured, so I don't personally know if I'm going to invest any money into any PSG or Lyon players, simply because of the fact that there is two possible ones that might be featured. But the second one in this league is the Monaco versus Marseille game. Now this would be really ideal if the game was PSG versus Marseille rather than PSG versus Lyon and Monaco versus Marseille. If it was PSG versus Marseille, I could 100% guarantee that game would be featured in the marquee matchups, because that game holds so much credibility, and it's such a fierce, intense, top of the league rivalry between two heavyweights. Well, players such as Falcao, I don't feel like you'd lose much on them if you did want to invest in them. But again, it's not really a derby between Monaco and versus Marseille. It's a reasonably big game again between two heavyweights. But like I said, it'd be better if it is PSG against Marseille. And again, for this reason, I don't personally believe I'm going to invest any money into the Monaco versus Marseille game, just like the PSG versus Lyon game, because I can't guarantee that any of these games will be featured, because none of them are direct derbies. But then again, like I said, there's a complete lack of big games this weekend, so there's always that chance that it might be. But I do believe out of any of the French games, it will be the PSG versus Lyon game. So if you do really want to invest in the French league, I would go for PSG versus Lyon. Next up, and the final game that I'm going to predict, is the Hamburg versus Werder Bremen game. I'd argue this, along with Basel versus Sion, would be another game which I argue would definitely be in there, because it's a northern German derby between the two most successful German northern clubs. So for that reason, it's an intense rivalry to be the king of the north of Germany in the football sense, if you like. So for that reason, I do believe that there will be a lot of chance for this game to be featured in the marquee matchups, and this is between Hamburg and Werder Bremen. So if you're wanting to invest in any of those players, I would suggest that highly, just generally in the Bundesliga. But I would, excuse me, try and invest directly into Hamburg and Werder Bremen players, since value won't go up too significantly in the Bundesliga, because it's a big league full of big players, all at their own unique and distinct prices. And something like this, a low end, not necessarily low end derby, but not a big derby in that league, isn't going to drive value up too highly, because of the fact it's such a big league, and a game like this isn't really going to drive value up too significantly. One thing about this though is that this, along with the Chelsea versus Spurs game, are the only two actual direct big derbies that are featured this weekend in real world fixtures. So for that reason, I could argue that this derby, along with the London derby, would be two games that are featured. But like I said with the London derby, it's currently the Hazard Player of the Month, so I don't personally know whether or not that will actually be featured, because like I said, it will drive inflation up so highly. And I don't believe EA would want to cause a top-heavy inflation in the Premier League, because it will drive all other leagues down in value, so there'll be a massive imbalance in the transfer market. But then again, they might like to cause that rupture. It's like a 50-50, which way do you sway? I don't personally know. I think it's a possibility, but not a certainty, because of the sheer lack of big games that are on offer this weekend. But two games I would highly suggest investing in is Basel versus Sion and Hamburg versus Bremen. So to conclude now, I honestly believe your best bet to invest would be into the Swiss League, being the Basel versus Sion game. Anyone in the Swiss League really that's gold for around about that discard price mark, because all will come in useful for building that squad. So all players in that category will drive up in value so much, and you can just go and sell it on for hopefully so much profit on the weekend, because so many people will be wanting to buy these players. So I would highly recommend going to invest, not all your money obviously because that's stupid, but a decent chunk of the money, or as much money as you're willing to want to spend on investing into this league, because I do believe that this will be featured, and sure enough at some point this league will rocket up in value. So you want to make sure you've got all your investments ready and set, ready for that weekend league marquee matchup to drop, so then all player values will rocket in value, and you will have all your players ready on your transfer list or whatever to sell on the weekend, when everyone's thinking, oh shit, I want them players now, so I'm going to do the squad builder challenge. And here's you commanding the market, because you've got every single player that you could ever need to sell on in this league. So I do believe this is going to be the best form of investing to get a massive profit boost this weekend, simply because of the fact it's a small league. I would argue to go directly for gold players. Gold, like I said, goalkeepers are always a good one to go for, but I would recommend investing directly into gold players, because they're the ones that are going to bring the squad value up so much more. And I do believe they might try and make it an exact player quality of gold, like I said, just to drive the market value up of all gold players in this league so much. But then again, the lack of gold players might make it difficult. So if you see any general cheap, highly rated players in this league, I would invest in them as well, simply because of the fact that they're going to drive the squad value up if there's not enough players to make it a fully gold one. And looking at all these, I don't feel like there is enough players to make it fully gold. So I'm contradicting myself a lot here, but I would just go for a lot of cheap players that you can find that obviously aren't bronze, because bronze aren't going to really bring the squad value up too much, and that will be a pain in the arse. So nonetheless guys, I hope you did enjoy. If you did, please drop me a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'm going off now to go and invest in tons of Swiss League players. I hope you do the same. I would recommend doing it reasonably quickly before all player values rocket significantly. But nonetheless guys, hope you enjoyed. Please drop me a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and peace.